Welcome to the Architectural Technologist Podcast. Jake Nash, it's so good to have you back again. I'd love to talk more about this new role that you've got in BIM in New Zealand. I'd love to know more about where we think BIM is going and especially what's important for us to learn to make sure that we're there. I was reading through your BIM handbook and I was there was it's called the key personnel and BIM roles. And it upset me a little bit because it had a BIM manager in the role that I thought should have been the architect. Maybe you can correct me on this one, but thanks for coming back. I appreciate your time. Go for it.
Yeah, sure. Look, I guess I'll just start with BIMIN NZ and what that actually is, sort of starting point for investigating BIM. BIMIN NZ is a long-standing industry group. We're not an industry body, but just an industry group of volunteers that have been championing the adoption and use of BIM along with other digital tools within the architecture and construction and operations industry in New Zealand. So how it originally started is we had the team called the BIM Acceleration Committee that was made up of people in architecture and construction and in other areas of asset management that kind of formed a committee, went to brands and got funding to start to build some material around BIM that could be free to use that might drive the adoption of it in New Zealand. And so that's how things like the BIMIN NZ handbook that you referenced earlier came about. That group existed for probably around a decade, and they were people that at one point had a lot of time and a lot of eagerness to do something ambitious like that on the side. 10 years into the career, those are all people that are digital leaders at their own firms and aren't as time rich as they used to be. And so they opened the floor up to the regional teams, of which I was part of the regional team for Wellington, and said, look, we want to hand over the reins to the regional teams. Why don't you guys go away and nominate a committee that can become a national committee that can write a new terms of reference and essentially take over BIMIN NZ for us. So that's something that's been happening this year. At the start of the year, we went back to the original BIM Acceleration Committee and gave them our new terms. This is what we want to do with BIMIN NZ. They were really happy with that and eager to hand it over to us. So as of a couple of months ago, me and a handful of people from all over New Zealand look after BIMIN NZ now. I serve as the National Vice Chair. My friend Fazim from Becca is the chair. And we have a team of people from Christchurch and Otago and all around the country helping us out. And they all have their own regional groups. So that is BIMIN NZ in a nutshell. Our main remit at the moment is managing local events where we get people together to talk about. We find speakers that are doing really interesting things in that space. And we just facilitate open sharing and education and growing the market's understanding and adoption of BIM and its processes in New Zealand. And Ethan, you were kind enough to attend our event last week where you asked some really great questions and brought some of your students along. So that's exactly what that format's for. It was great to have you there.
I just want my students to connect with the industrial people. So I told them you must come and connect. And they are a bit intimidated, but I said, there's no way to shy. Nothing. There is no long questions. You just ask, meet with people. Then two of my students follow along with me. And it was quite interesting. These are the students from Wellington and from one student from Palmerston North, also, and he is quite chatty and he stayed behind and asked a lot of questions. And also, I think he is creating his job opportunity for himself, something he can leverage, the students can leverage on from BIMIN NZ. Close group. I also saw some familiar faces as well. Really good. Thanks for arranging that. That's events.
It's our pleasure.
Where I live, of course, you might remember, but there's lots of very small practices and not very many big ones. The big one is probably using BIM already, but there's a lot of those sort of intermediate things. You've got a lot of designers coming through. So just quickly, if you were a student, if you were talking to the tutors at the local college, what things should we be teaching our students?
Just the idea of BIM, I think, is a good place to start, because I think one of the issues that's disrupted the industry is a little bit as a misunderstanding of what BIM is. There's BIM, and then there's the colloquial BIM. And the colloquial BIM is basically the catch-all for anything technology related in the construction space. So just people would refer to AutoCAD as CAD as just an industry term. People are quite often thinking that Revit is BIM or BIM is Revit. BIM's not a software, BIM's a process. And so I think if you are teaching your students about BIM, I don't think you need to dive in too deep, but I think you need to set this idea in their mind that BIM is a process, not a tool or a software.
Cool. I think Ethan and I have covered this one once before about BIM as a process. I had a very interesting talk with Biplap Sakar, the ex-CEO of Vectorworks recently.
Yeah.
And he was talking about BIM 2.0, which is, I think, if I remember rightly, cloud-based, so that he sees a move away from individual CAD stations like Revit, storing a single model and sharing it, to a cloud-based system where it's computer independent.
Yeah. I think the industry is moving that way. I think that in New Zealand, there are still some barriers that firms need to get past, which would allow them to adopt that a little bit better. I think one of the main challenges is IP. I think some firms, big firms, small firms, still have a misunderstanding of what is IP or what IP is valuable. And BIM is a process that encourages people to share everything. I know that when we first went down our BIM pathway at Warren and we were doing model exchanges, we would strip out everything except for just the modeled elements and share that with our structural engineers and our mechanical engineers and vice versa. Because for some reason we had this feeling that giving them the sheets and giving them the families and the drawings and all that was willingly handing over our IP. I think the industry is catching up there. I think the software vendors obviously have their own reasons for wanting everything cloud-based. It probably counteracts piracy a lot, but also it does open the door for unrestricted collaboration. And I think that there's a movement towards wanting to own the whole process from start to finish, the design through the documentation and the construction. So the contractors involved as well, all on a singular platform.
It sounded to me, so when I was talking to Biplap, it sounded to me like that BIM 2.0 would be a cloud-based platform, but the program you use to interface with that could be different. So for example, I could use Vectorworks to interface with the model, and you could use Revit to interface with that model. And so we would both be interfacing with the model, but using the tools and the program that we're used to using.
Yeah. I haven't seen any examples of that personally. There is an aspect of interoperability that's present in what we've been doing. The common data environment that you're talking about, the cloud, the hosting area, in this respect would be something like, for us, it would be Autodesk Construction Cloud. People can put their Vectorworks models, their ArchiCAD models, their Civil 3D models into that space. But for us to interpret that, we still need to convert it. We would be looking at some kind of exporting it to a format that works for us, or using some kind of automation to convert it, or using a third-party tool like Speckle or something that enables interoperability. I think that there is a future where all of those tools interact seamlessly. I would like to get to that point, but I don't know that we're there yet. It's certainly not in New Zealand.
It's not close from what Biplap said.
All right, okay. Yeah.
But so for example, Vectorworks does some really cool 3D modeling. But the 3D modeling engine actually isn't owned by Vectorworks. It's Parasolid. And Parasolid licensed their 3D modeling engine to different people. So in that way, and he didn't say this, but this is the way I interpreted it, in that way that there would be some sort of data system. And the suggestion was that IFC is not going to be the long-term solution. So there would be something where you'd license the data system, but then the CAD program would then convert that data to the things that you know. And so that's why I thought that there could be working on a Revit software, working on a model, and I'm working with Vectorworks, and Ethan's working with ArchiCAD, and we're all working with different programs, but actually accessing the same raw data that the CAD program then turns into the things that we're familiar with and things we see.
Yeah.
Because to me, BIM has to be interoperable in order to be BIM.
Yes, absolutely. It comes down to who's going to create that, because obviously if you're someone like Autodesk, it's in your best interest to have everyone using your products instead of supporting them using someone else's on your system. But I think they'll be challenged on that. I think there's also this other avenue that is starting to crop up a lot, and you might see a lot more of this as people using open source software. Something even like Blender BIM might start to eat up a little bit more of the space, because the open source nature of it is that people can, with the skills, can edit it and change it to do exactly what they want to do, because they have full access to update the software as they see fit and make it fit for purpose, as opposed to relying on the companies like Autodesk to introduce these new changes. I think it's also going to extend beyond the models, and it already is in some respect. If you're running a project, it's not just models and drawings, it's all of the information that you're exchanging between your contractors. It's RFIs, it's CANs, it's all the financial stuff. I think that you're going to get to a point where Construction Cloud or Build or whatever the platform is will want to be the host for all of that, including the design tools and the collaboration tools right at the front, master planning, massing, and all of the management dashboards as well. So I think what you're referring to is a collaboration tool that holds everything, not just models in different formats,
Yes.
but the entire process start to finish.
Yeah, I use the word model, but I really mean data.
Mm.
Because if we model a door, but actually a door is nothing more than data. The size of the jamb, the size of the leaf, the type of handle, the number of hinges, that's all just really just data that we're using a graphic interface to represent to us in a way we can understand. But in its rawest sense, it's just numbers and information.
Yeah.
And so in that way, there should be a possibility to do that. We're probably getting a little esoteric now. So I really wanted to find out a bit more about BIM in New Zealand. I'd love to come to some of your meetings. I'm going to arrange with a friend of mine. We're going to come down. I really appreciate having you with us. And I was coming back to the last time I asked you what advice you've got for someone starting in the industry.
Yeah. And engage, come along to an event. It's interesting. You talked about regional events. We do have an interest in, so there's no reason why we couldn't do a BIM in Hastings or a BIM in Nelson or whatever, if there's an audience there and we've got someone that's willing to tell a few stories. So you might start to see a few of those pop up. You might see one a little more locally. So if you're a student in EIT or in Taranaki or Palmerston North, you might still have access to a smaller version of those events. But the advice I'd give to students is that these events are designed as collaborative educational pieces. I was really flattered to see a bunch of students come to the last one. Not only that, but I saw some of their LinkedIn posts later, and they were talking about what they loved, what they enjoyed, what they learned. One of them said, I never thought I'd be excited about asset management, but here I am. And that's, nothing makes me happier than seeing those kind of responses, because that's exactly why we do it. Yes, come to an event, but also engage with the other people at the event. Learn what you can from them, not just the people talking, but the people that there to chat and network and share their own stories. And if you want to be introduced to someone, some of the students at the last event, you come up and talk to me or my counterparts in the other studios in the other regions and say, hey, I'd love to talk to that person. Can you introduce me? And we'd be more than happy to do.
What a great idea. I've got to thank you again, Jake. It's so lovely that you give it your time for us, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.